everyone, I am C. Surbi Punshi, Indirect Tax Expert at ClearTax, and in this video, we are going to learn about the recent changes which are done in GSTR 1. So now when we talk about the GSTR 1 form, we know that we report all of our outward supplies in this GSTR 1 filing. But there are some changes which has been done via notification 26/2022, where they have introduced some of the sections in respect of the supplies which you are making through an e-commerce operator, or maybe in respect of an e-commerce operator like Swiggy, Zomato, who have to pay the taxes under the reverse charge under section 9 subsection 5. So let's understand in detail about these changes and what exactly or how exactly we have to report this transaction in GSTR 1. So let's see. So here, if we just look into our GSTR 1 form, right? So when we look into GSTR 1 form, we have different sections like B2B, B2C, export transaction, B2C others. We have 8A, the credit debit note registered. All of these transactions are there where we report different kinds of transaction in different buckets. Now, when we see the first change, which is in respect of this table 7, and when we just talk about table number 7, where we actually report the B2C as supply, which means whenever I am making the sales or the supplies to an unregistered person, in that particular case, I report my transaction in table 7. Today, if I am making the supply through an e-commerce operator, which means let's say if I am supplying something through Flipkart or maybe something through Amazon, in that particular case, I report this transaction here itself, right? I'm assuming that here the final customer is an unregistered person. So if I make any transaction through an e-commerce operator, in that case, I always report this transaction here itself. So for us, there is no such major change when it comes to table number 7. They have just clarified, they have just clearly written that if you are making any supply through an e-commerce operator, and here I am a supplier, I am supplying to an e-commerce operator, then you have to include all that supply. If it is the final customer is unregistered person, so I have to include all my supply here itself. So what wording they have changed, that here when it comes to table number 7, you have to report your consolidated rate-wise outward supply, including the supply made to an e-commerce operator attracting TCS. Right? So whenever I have made any supply to an e-commerce operator and that e-commerce operator is required to collect the TCS, which means that person is deducting some TCS before making me the payment, then in that particular case, I have to report the transaction, because final liability anyhow is on me to pay the liability on that particular transaction to the government. Right? So I have to just club that information, show it here. Today also we do the same thing, so there is no big change. But now the another important point which we should understand, that whenever we are talking about that e-commerce operator, so now whenever we talk about an e-commerce operator, there are mainly two kind of an e-commerce operator. The one kind of an e-commerce operator who are liable to collect the TCS at the rate of 1%. And then there is another kind of an e-commerce operator who are not required to collect the TCS. Rather, they are liable to pay the entire liability on the transaction which is done through them under the reverse charge, which is actually covered under our section 9 subsection 5. One of the example could be the restaurant services. The other example could be like I would say like Ola, Uber, you have seen, right? The cases in that particular case, they are liable to pay the taxes under 9(5), which means they will discharge the entire liability, right? So these are the second category of an e-commerce operator. So here, if you are supplying to an e-commerce operator where they are collecting the TCS, right? They're just collecting the TCS at the rate of 1%, but the final liability is on you to pay the taxes to the government on all of your outward supplies which you have made through them. Then you have to report that information under B2CS if it is a actual supplies to the unregistered person. So today also you do the same. So there is nothing, no change over there. But now the second important change, question is, okay, what if I'm supplying to an e-commerce operator who is liable to pay the taxes under reverse charge? Today, you report that information under table 8, which means you report that information under the nil rated section. So tomorrow also is the same thing. If you are supplying to an e-commerce operator who is discharging the liability under the reverse charge, then you have to report that supplies under the nil rated supply. Now, the another important change for you. So now if you're an e-commerce operator, right, and there's another person who is an e-commerce supplier, right? There are two things. One is e-commerce operator, other is e-commerce supplier. Let's first understand from the perspective of e-commerce supplier. If you are an e-commerce supplier supplying to an e-commerce operator, in that particular case, there is a new section which has been introduced, which is table number 14. So till now, if we see, there are all the tables till 13. So now there is a new table which has been introduced, which is table number 14, and which talks about that you have to show the details of supplies made to an e-commerce operator, on which e-commerce operator is liable to collect the tax under 52 or is liable to pay the tax under 95. So here we said that there are two categories of an e-commerce operator. One who collects the TCS at the rate of 1%, the other who actually discharge the liability under the reverse charge. So here both the category, whether you are supplying through Flipkart, Amazon, or you are supplying through maybe example could be Swiggy, Zomato, in all the cases, right, in both the category, if you are supplying to an e-commerce operator, you have to show this information in table number 14 also, right? So you have to show your liability in the respective table 7 or table 8, depending on what exactly or through which particular e-commerce operator you are actually supplying your services or the goods. At the same time, same information will also have to be reported in table number 14 if you are an e-commerce supplier, right? So this is the another important change for you, which will be applicable from most probably January return period, where you also have to separately report all of your supply which you have made to an e-commerce operator. And this information you have to clearly say, okay, what are the supplies on which e-commerce operator is liable to collect TCS, and what are the supply on e-commerce who is liable to pay the taxes under 95. So if you're doing through Swiggy, Zomato, in that case you have to report in B part. If you're doing through maybe Amazon, Flipkart, and they are just examples. Obviously, there are a lot of e-commerce operator. If you're supplying through them, you have to report the information in table A. If you have wrongly mentioned something, because obviously there are chances that you have made some mistake while you were reporting this information. So if you have to do any amendments, then there is our table 14A, where we can always show any amendments in relation to this over here. So this was the change if you're an e-commerce supplier. If you're an e-commerce supplier, you have to report all of your supply in the normal table, which is table number 7, or it could also be table number 4 if it's a B2B thing. Or at the same time, you also have to report this supply in table number 14. And if there are certain amendments, then in the next month, you have to report that in 14A. Now, from the perspective of an e-commerce operator, because when it comes to Flipkart or Amazon, they also have to somewhere report this information. Or when it comes to the person like Swiggy and Zomato, they also have to report this information. So now if we think from the Amazon, Flipkart and all, right, whenever they collect this TCS, they are anyhow filing the return. They file GSTR rate, and in GSTR rate, they are already reporting all this information. So for that person, they don't have to report anything in GSTR 1. It's very clear. But for the person like an e-commerce operator, like I would say Swiggy or maybe Zomato, right? So they are not collecting the TCS. If we talk about that, they are actually not collecting the TCS. Rather, they have to discharge the liability under the reverse charge. So for that, they have introduced one more table, which is table number 15. So what they are actually saying is that you have to report the detail of the supplies made to an e-commerce operator, on which e-commerce operator is liable to pay the taxes under section 9 subsection 5. So for Swiggy, Zomato type companies, what they're saying, you are an e-commerce operator, you have to give that information, whatever the supply has been done through you. For example, Domino's, right? So Domino's has supplied something to maybe through Swiggy to a final customer. Then Swiggy has to report the supplies which has been done on behalf of Domino's through their platform. So there, what they are going to tell, you have to tell, okay, who is that person? Who is that? Let's say here in this example, Domino's was a person. Then who is a recipient? Whether that person is a registered or unregistered, you have to mention that. You have to mention the GSTN of the supplier. You have to mention the GSTN of the recipient, and you have to give a document level information. They have to clearly provide what is the document number, document date, the rate of tax. All of this information has to be given in table number 50. So this is applicable for the e-commerce operator. who are liable to pay the taxes under 9(5). This is not applicable for the e-commerce operator who have to collect the TCS at the rate of 1%. So it is not applicable for them, because for them they're going to file GSTR 8, where they are anyhow going to show the supplies which has been done through their platform in respect of all of their e-commerce suppliers. So this is one of the important change, and if they have made any mistake, they can always correct in 15A, right? So this was the major change when it comes to the GSTR 1 filing. Hope you understand and it clarifies your most of the query, because this is really very relevant if you are supplying anything to an e-commerce operator, and it is also relevant for an e-commerce operator because these are the bigger changes in respect of all the e-commerce supplies. Thank you for watching this video.